Hello students, this is Professor Chalai, and in this lecture we're going to look at the states of matter. You can follow along with me using our chapter worksheets, which you can find under the Resources tab in ACE. Now, earlier we talked about how chemistry is essentially the study of matter, but what is matter? Well, matter, as many of you may know, is anything that occupies space and has mass. So matter is anything that occupies space and has mass, which is pretty much everything around us. Light is one of those things that is all around us that doesn't have mass, and it's not something that we're going to study in chemistry very often. So matter is anything that occupies space and has mass, and we may all know about the different states of matter. For example, we have solids, liquids, gases, and some of you might be familiar with the state of matter called plasma. What are their properties? Well, solid things are solid. They have a fixed volume, meaning that you can't squeeze them down to be any smaller size. For example, my phone here, if we ignore all of the air spaces that might be inside, I can't really squeeze this into a much smaller size. If they could, they would make a smaller phone. So solids have a fixed volume and also has a fixed shape. Solid things are very rigid. Whatever shape they're in is what shape they're going to be if I let go of it. It's going to retain that shape. So it has a fixed volume and a fixed shape. Liquids, on the other hand, also have a fixed volume for the most part. For example, if you have a cup of water and you pour it into a different container, the amount of water, the volume, the space that it takes up is going to be fixed, but the shape is going to be different. In the example of water, it's going to take the shape of whatever container it's in. If I pour water from a cup into a bowl, the shape of the water would change. Gases, as you might guess, has neither fixed shape nor fixed volume. So what that means is for fixed shape, gases will take the shape of whatever container it's in. If it's in the room, it'll take the shape of the room. If it's in a little glass jar, it'll take the shape of the glass jar. It doesn't have fixed volume either, which means that gases can be compressed. This is why we have gases of various pressure, because we can compress them. And finally, plasma are like gases. Sorry. They're like gases, but they have charged particles, but contains charged particles. Now, there are reasons why these solids, liquids, gases, and plasma behave the same way that the way that they do. We're going to ignore plasma for now and just focus on solids, liquids, and gases. We said that solids have fixed volume and fixed shape. That's because the molecules are often bonded to each other, and we're going to look at this later on in the semester. So because they're strongly bonded to each other, it's difficult to break those bonds and change the shape. It's also difficult to push them in any closer to change the volume or to pull them apart. Liquids, on the other hand, so these are for solids. Liquids, on the other hand, are similar to solids in that they have some strong bonds, but they also have weak interactions between them. And so these weak bonds could be broken, and that's why liquids have no fixed shape. You could easily break those weak bonds and make any new shapes that you want. Whereas for gases, these molecules have very weak bonds between them, and so you can easily change the shape, you can easily change the volume by pressing by compressing or contracting them. But we're going to get into why solids, liquids, and gases have the shapes and properties that they do in a little later in the semester. So those are the states of matter, and those are the properties that they have in terms of volume and shape. Another thing that I want to touch upon in this video is the law of conservation of matter. Now, we talked about in the previous lecture about what a scientific law is, and a scientific law, if you remember, is just a series of observations. And for the law of the conservation of matter, what we've observed over time is that there is no detectable change in the total quantity of matter and here I'm just going to put in parentheses mass, when matter converts from one form to another. Now, I want to point out here that there is no change in the mass when matter is converted from one form to another, whether that be from one state like solid to another state like liquid, or when it undergoes a chemical reaction. But I do want to point out that mass and weight are not the same thing, are not the same things. Mass is the amount of matter something contains, whereas weight is the effective mass, the effective force on some mass. So your mass under the effect of Earth's gravitational pull gives you your weight. This is why your weight is different on Earth than it would be on the surface of the moon, for example, but the amount of mass that you have did not change between traveling from the Earth to the moon. So that would bring us to the end of this section. Just to summarize, we went over the definition for matter, the 3 or 4 types states of matter and their properties, and the law of conservation of matter and the difference between mass and weight. I will see you in the next lecture.